Hello. Alrighty. So what we're doing today is we're doing inventory update. All right. So inventory update using freeCodeCamp.com's advanced algorithm scripting challenges, and I've got a pretty nice, concise chunk of code I want to show you. However, it's going to require a bit of I don't want to say advanced, but you know, a pretty good understanding of a few things. So I want to go over a few of these things with you, talking about objects and array methods that we've used before. You should be starting to get really comfortable with these, and as I go over these concepts really should be clicking. And hopefully, at this point, you should be able to start developing these solutions for yourselves and not just copying over. So let me show you my screen, and I'll walk you through some things here. So here's the inventory update problem, where they're given a current inventory, and let's say we get a new truckload of supplies, and here's what's on it, and we want to update our current inventory to reflect the new values. However, sometimes, like toothpaste here, we don't have any, so it's not even in our current inventory, so then we would have to add that into our current inventory. Otherwise, if it exists, we just have to add the amount. So like bowling ball, you have 21 and 67, so you would end up with 88 bowling balls. One more thing is we want to make sure that we have our inventory here. It needs to be in alphabetical order by the name and not this number. So we have to sort this here. So we need to figure out how to sort it by just this word here, this descriptor, this string, and still have this matching number here. However, we want this back as a 2D array. Yet if we know we have a key and a value, excuse me, generally that tells us we're going to be using objects. So we're probably going to be transforming something into an object, generally concatenating these into an object, and then returning that object as a 2D array after we do some things to it. So let's take a look at what we already know. If we want to concatenate an array or two arrays, we know that we're going to use this reduce method. Now, in the reduce method, in this time, we only really need the accumulator and then the current value. All right, we don't really need to bring in the index here because the index number we don't need right now. And we can always call the array method on this as well if we needed the length, which we do not. If we go down and we take a look at how we concatenate or how we add things together, you can kind of scroll down and remember we can do this A plus B right here, right? And just like we can concatenate individual values, we can actually go ahead and then do this with the arrays as well. So I'm going to use this as well. This is where I'm just going to be adding everything together. I'm going to concatenate the arrays, and then I'm going to sum up some values based on some logic. We are also going to be using the map function. Now remember, the map function iterates through an array or an object, and what we're going to be looking at, or an array rather, not an object, iterating through an array, and then it's going to apply a function to each individual thing inside of that array. So we're going to need that. We're also going to be using sort. Now, you can use sort this way, which is kind of cool, but this is sort of the long way around this problem. But this is something I did want to show you, where if you take a look at this, when we're looking at comparing this using the sort function, what you can do is you can actually determine how you want things to sort. For example, let's just say you have an if statement. You're going to set it up like this, and you're going to say if something. So if A is less than B. Now, this can be a physical number, or this can be in terms of alphabetical order. So you can just say, if you're just looking at alphabetical order here, and you're really taking a look at what you want to do, you can just say A is directly equal to or greater than or less than, and JavaScript will know we're talking about alphabetical order if we're applying this to a string. For example, you can say that if A is greater than B, and you're applying it to strings, and A is the word alpha and B is the word beta, what we want to do is return -1. And what -1 is going to do, think about our index. Okay, our index values is a zero-based index, so it's going to move that -1 space on the index or put it before something else. So you can see how we're just moving things in our array back and forth, whether we're moving to the left with the -1, or if it's greater than, we're going to move it to the right with a +1, or if they are equal, we're to something else, we are just going to return 0, which means don't mess with the index value as we're going through and iterating through this array. So we can do that as well if we want to deal with our 2D array. However, there's a much smarter way about this, where we can just sort just like this with just using the words themselves and not associating the values with them until after they are sorted, which is what we are going to do. The next thing that we need to do is, in order to do that, we need to isolate the object keys. And we know already, since we're dealing with this 2D array, but I want to associate a value with the key, that I'm going to be making this into an object. However, I only want to sort the object key, right? Well, guess what? There's a method here for objects called object keys. And you could probably guess what it does is it returns all of the object keys. So if we sort the object keys, we will then just get everything in alphabetical order, and then we can reassociate with that the values to that key. And notice that when we have a key value pair, we can set this up where we apply the value here first and then the key afterwards, because we're just returning a 2D array. So that's the logic that we're going to go through and do this. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start off with so we have a current inventory, a new inventory, and we need to create an object, right? So we already know I need to start with an object here. So I'm just going to create I'll call it object inventory, all right? And what I want to do is I'm going to concatenate this array1 and array2. So arr1 dot concat arr2. So now I just stick both of these together in one giant list, which is all good and well. However, what I want to do is that doesn't really help us. I need to do something to this, all right? Remember our reduce methods here. I want to add together the values, all right, if we already have the object itself, like a bowling ball. All right, if we have a bowling ball, I want to add just those numbers together. If we don't have the bowling ball, however, I want to add that bowling ball into our inventory list. So how do I do that? Well, I'm just going to reduce everything down. And remember, we could use map here as well. So you can always use map. I don't really think you'd want to use filter here, but you do have an option between reduce or map here. Since I'm going to use map somewhere else, sorry, that was my Python that I'm working through. I'm going to use reduce here, and then I'll use map later because I can. There are subtle differences to these, and there is some good documentation you can read if you simply, obviously, just Google it about the differences and when you use one over the other. But for right now, in these simpler challenges, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to reduce, and reduce, remember, we need a function. All right, and that function, we have an accumulator and then a current value. So here's reduce. And remember that we have, scroll up here, an accumulator and a current value, which in a previous video I've heard someone else call next, which was pretty slick. I didn't like the way that sounded. But for my purposes, I'm just going to use A and B. All right. So I'm just going to use A because A comes before B, and then this A also can be sound like an accumulator. So that's just what I'm going to do because it's easier. All right, so here we go. I have to remember to finish this sentence here. However, when I'm done with this function here, I don't want an array or a 2D array. I want to make sure I get an object. So remember, there's an optional statement here, just like we did in the last challenge, where we started off with an empty array. Here, I want an empty object. So I can call object keys and then sort those object keys. So basically, what I want to say is, remember my if statements? So if true, right? So just like we would use if true, I want to say a true statement. So what else can I say besides true? Well, first thing I want to check is if the object, so let's look at half-eaten apple. So as we're iterating through, I want to say, okay, is there already a half-eaten apple in the array somewhere else? And if that is true, all I want to do is add the numbers. Otherwise, do something else. So how would I say that? So essentially, all I'm doing is looking at A. Okay, remember, we have an object. It's going to be a key value pair here. So if A, all right, I'm taking a look at A, and then I'm looking at the, I want to see if in this A, all right, which is going to be the first object that I'm looking at, which is really going to be all of them, if this here exists, all right? And this here, or the next thing here, all right, is going to be an array. This is the 0 position. This is the first position, all right? So this next value, B, all right, and I'm going to want the name itself, 1, okay? So if this is true, all right, so if the accumulator, A, all right, already has, all right, so already has the name here, or this key, if that already exists, all I want to do is add the numbers. All I want to do is add those numbers together, all right? Just the value, not necessarily the key. So if that, I'm going to take this accumulator value, all right, and all I'm going to say is that B1, that accumulator value, right, and then I'm just going to add that. So here is the key plus equals B. All right. So all I'm saying is add to this A just this value right here. I'll show you, end my sentence. Else just saying that, okay, so we didn't find this key anywhere. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to add it in by itself. How do I do that? A, all right. I'm just going to set that equal to B. Right, if else, if else. Now remember, I have to have a return statement. And what do I want to return? I just want to return A, just the accumulator. And so, all right. So I didn't write this out with words. I could have wrote out accumulator and current value and made this a little clearer, but I wanted to make this as short as possible here. All right. And so I tried to use values that were a little bit more abstract. Okay. And with using a different level of abstraction here, you're going to have to try to understand exactly what is going on. All right, so this is A, there, plus equals. And this is where you're really taking a look at your syntax and making sure your syntax is correct. And you can see here, my syntax is a little off here. This is what I want. All right, so let's see what this returns. All right, so I have return A. All right, so that gets me out of the function. Good. Return. All right. So now I get an object. So I see bowling ball, 21. All right, socks, and it tells me how many of these hairpins, bowling balls, and key value pairs I have in here. All right. So this is how we can do this and make it look a little funky. That's all good and well. But what do we want to do here? Well, let's take a look at this. Let's make this a little clearer later on so I can actually put these values in for my reduce accumulator current value. But again, like I said, I really don't want to do that right now, mainly because I want you to kind of struggle and grapple with what's going on and try to make sense of this yourself here. Hope this one's a 0. That's what's going on here. There we go. Bowling ball, 88, dirty sock, 2, hairpin, 3, microphone, 5, half-eaten apple, 3, toothpaste, 7. Good, there we go. I know I had a mistake somewhere, and you can always see that as well. All right, so now this is what we have, one object with everything together, and I've just, if the value is already there, added the value to that key. All right, and now notice that it's out of order. Because I made an object, the key here is the string, and the value is over here. That's going to be a problem. All right, so what I need to do is I just want to return and sort these object keys. Return and sort these object keys. So object dot keys, and what object keys do I want to return? Well, I want to return the object keys of this object here, which is my object. I really don't like that name. I was just trying to go ahead and follow what they have here, because that's the way people are. That's the way they're sorting things. So, or naming conventions that they're using. So let's take a look at this. So I just want to return the keys, and let's see what happens if we do a simple sort on the object keys, which are strings. So that should sort them, right? Hey, look, it sorts them. Nice. That's alphabetical order for us. And now the order that we put these methods in matters, okay? So returning an object key, and notice that now we have an array of the keys themselves. All right, so returning a new array. So now I can map this new array. All right, now like I said, we can use map or reduce here. And in this map, you have to give it an anonymous function. And we're going to apply a function to each one of these keys. All right, so function, all right, and the function that we're going to be doing is, what we're going to do is we'll call this, well, that's really the name that we want, right? So we're going to call that the name we're going to pass in. This down here, right? And all we need to do is return out of this 2D array. So what 2D array do we want? All right, I want an array, okay? Inside of this array, I want not just this, okay? Here I have bowling ball, dirty sock. Before this bowling ball, I want to put the number that's associated with it, and I can use this object inventory to do so. All right, so how do I do that? Well, the first thing I want is the value, okay? So I'm going to go with the inventory object. Oops. Object inventory. All right, now that's going to be the entire thing. And I don't want the entire object. I just want to return the value. So I can put the name here, which is going to return the value of that. Remember our bracket and our dot notations. All right, which you're going to be careful with. And then I want a comma. So that's going to give me my value that's associated with bowling ball now in this new concatenated array that I made an object, comma, then the name. Okay, and that should give us, let's see. You've got this. Success. All right, there we go. So a few things about this to remember. Object keys, I'm just calling the object keys, which I showed you. I'm sorting those. Then I'm mapping a simple function using the name of the thing in the inventory here, because the object inventory. Object keys is just going to give us the key, right? Not the value. So I called this name. If it makes more sense to talk keys here, if you're talking key value, this could make more sense to you, but I would just, for myself, I just called it the name, just so don't get confused. If you can write key here, if that makes more sense. These A's and B's up here, since we've done so much with reduce, I really wanted you to focus on syntax here and what this all means. If you replace A's and B's here, and you want to come back and read this, if I were to do this, so I have to come back and read this later, my original code, I actually used, where are we at? Reduce. I actually used accumulator and current value, or curval and ACC for accumulator here, just so when I go back, I can understand what's going on, and it makes it easier to read. But I just wanted to show you that you can actually abbreviate all of that and do less writing as well. Even though it looks a little bit more confusing, you really have to keep your brackets straight, because you could see how I tried to keep my brackets straight and I had a little bit of an error, and I had to go back and try to see what was going on, just really testing my understanding of what actually is happening here, which is really what we want to do, is we want to test ourselves and push ourselves as we're coding, because that's going to help for a more thorough and deeper understanding of what we are doing. All right. So hopefully all of this makes sense. Now, remember, if I didn't sort this ahead of time, I would have this 2D array that would be all out of sorts here, right? Out of sorts, get it? And then I could sort it afterwards. After I'm done with my 2D array, I could apply this method here, where I'm looking at the index numbers that I'm going to return in my map or my reduce. All right, my map function. So that is another way to do it, but again, that's just much more lengthy. And I decided for you to focus on abstraction here and trying to understand what's going on, rather than going deeper into our map and reduce functions. Okay. So hopefully all of this was good. Remember, try to make sure you go through and read the documentation and try to consider what they are saying inside of the documentation, because this stuff is really useful, and there is many ways to solve any problem. So it just kind of helps if you've gone through and try to figure out what they are saying, what they want you to do over here. So again, hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you all next time.